Okay, hello everybody. How's it going? This is Azren, the language nerd here. It's nice to see everyone. It's been a little while since I have posted any videos, and it's been a even longer time since I've done any interviews, whether it's on the podcast, so hello podcast people, or
Mhm.
on YouTube. So it's been quite some time. But I came across someone on Instagram a few weeks back, and I thought that it would be interesting to interview her because of what she does. And so I'll introduce you all to Michelle. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, everyone.
How are you
Hi.
today?
Good, thank you.
That's good. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about Cantonese mommy? What is that all about?
So let me introduce myself a little bit. I am Michelle. I originally from Hong Kong. I'm living in New York City right now. I have two children. One boy, he's 6 years old, and a baby girl. She just turned one a few months ago. Yes, I started Cantonese mommy when my son was about 2.5 because I was looking for some, YouTube channels or something, some resource for me to teach Cantonese. And I couldn't find something non-animated because I was looking for something more just really slow pace and just like what I was doing on my YouTube channel, just reading stories. And I couldn't find any, so I started my YouTube channel. And another reason why I did it because I have a cousin. She lives in a non-Chinese speaking country, and she doesn't read or write, but she can speak Cantonese because of my aunt. Um, so she also have a son which is same age as mine, and we are like trying to teach our children Cantonese. And same thing that happens to us, like we couldn't find any resource online that's free for all. So I was originally just recording video of me reading story to my um, to her son, and also to her because her Cantonese level is just very basic. And at the end, I was like, why don't I just upload on YouTube and share with everybody? Because I think they might have same problem finding the same resource that I'm looking for.
So I have a possibly a very basic question, but I'll tell you where it's coming from. So I speak with a number of parents who have another first language that's not English. So maybe they speak Hindi or Gujarati or Mandarin or Japanese or whatever it is. They speak
Mm-hmm.
another language, they have kids, and they want their kids to learn the language that they speak, as in their mother tongue. And they will often say things to me like, how do I go about doing it? How can I make sure that my son or my daughter speaks the language that I speak, my first language? And for me, it's always I always view it as a reasonably, at least the starting point is reasonably basic, which is that, well, you need to speak that language in the house. So if you speak Mandarin and you want, or Cantonese in your case, if you want your son or daughter to speak Cantonese in the house and actually grow up with it, well, that means that in the house you have to use Cantonese and not English. And a lot of the parents that I interact with, that's hard for them. Like for some reason, for one reason or another, it seems to me that they have a hard time computing that and processing that. And what is your perspective on that?
Um, I think it's the motivation for parents, how strong of a desire to teach your children your language. For me, I have very high expectation. I want my children to speak bilingually. I mean, a true bilingual, which means we can read both language newspaper, talk about politics in both languages fluently. When you can look for a job in Cantonese or in English without problem, close to native level. I mean, if I could do it, why can't my children do it? They're supposed to be better than we are, right? So, and I set up my goal and I do whatever I can to try to reach that goal. I think that's the motivation that I have. And for other parents, I don't know how, what are their expectation or how much time and effort they would looking to spend on their children. They may have different different expectation. Maybe they want their children to play music really well instead of talking in their mother tongue. So I think different families have different goals, and that's why maybe they put that language goal to be a lower priority. So that's why it's not working for them. But for us, that priority is the highest. So that's why my sons can speak it very fluently.
I always wonder though, because in my eyes, it's not hard to speak your, like when a newborn baby's born and the baby doesn't speak any language, it's very straightforward for the parent, especially if it's their mother tongue, to speak their mother tongue only at home. And yet I find, my theory is that parents are used to, if I live in Canada, if they've been living in Canada for, let's say, 20 years, they're so used to speaking in English now on a day-to-day basis that they actually feel awkward having to speak their mother tongue at home with their baby. I wonder if that's what the reason is, at least initially when they're younger. As they get older, there's different challenges that arise. So I speak Gujarati, for example. It's a language from India. When I was growing up, my mom was very insistent that I learn it. And so she would only speak Gujarati in the house. Nursery rhymes were translated to Gujarati. Stories were translated to Gujarati. She told my family that you must speak in Gujarati with Azren. So there's a really strong foundation for the first, let's say, roughly 5-ish years approximately. But then what happens is once you start going to school and you have friends who speak English and you go to school in English, in my case, my English vocabulary started to increase and my Gujarati vocabulary didn't. And so until I was an adult, I chose to re-study Gujarati as an adult. And so I'm a lot better now. I'm a lot stronger now than I was, let's say, 4 years ago. Or even just growing up, for crying out loud. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is I just find it interesting that at least for those first, let's say, 3 to 5 years, I always think it's reasonably straightforward for parents just to go on the most basic level. You could just use that language in the house, and that won't get them to be able to talk about politics or things like that, because that probably won't happen just from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting.
I find a lot of parents they don't have a problem in the first 5 years. Like many of them are very eager, or at least their mother tongue level is up to kindergarten level. I would say, like teaching colors, teaching numbers, teaching shapes is not a problem for them. And I see a lot of parents slowly don't know what to do after the kindergarten years, when they are kind of not strong enough to speak more than just color and shapes in their mother tongue, because English have taken over in their learning in their life, especially like our case. Many of us are living in non-Chinese speaking country. They do not know more than like the household language. So so that's why they don't feel comfortable enough talking more than just the baby language.
What about, are most of the parents you interact with, are they people that are second generation Chinese?
I think in US you have like all type of people. You have newly immigrants that you are. I think the new immigrants is that they're so busy with their life, finding a job, and kind of like the first generation parents that arrive to the new country, where you don't have time, even though you have the talents to speak the language, you don't have enough time to speak and teach at home. Therefore, your children is not going to be as good as you are, because they're trying to settle down in a new country. They have so much to do. They work 24 hours, right? And the second generation and onward, the problem is that they may have a little more time, but they don't have enough foundation to teach. So that's why you have all these Chinese school, you have all this language school to teach the children. And the second and third generation, because their mom arrived to this country, they don't have time to learn more than just the household language. And therefore, they just got stuck in the elementary level. And then they don't have interest to learn more than the elementary levels of the language. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm curious to hear about how you have gone about teaching your kids Cantonese, um, especially because my personal experience with learning my heritage language is that it was never explicitly taught. It was just the norm. Like from birth, that's the language that was spoken. It was never taught. Now reading and writing was taught, and more formal things were taught, but the day-to-day conversational understanding, like it was never, for me personally, it was never taught. It was something that it's all I remember. It's all there was. Like my grandparents only spoke it, my mom spoke it, my aunt spoke it, I actually didn't know until I was probably 8 or 9. There's some people in my family that they speak Gujarati, but not quite as well as English. I used to have a hard time knowing in my family who spoke English better than Gujarati, because I'd forget, because I was so used to always going to Gujarati, and then I would think, oh, Bansi doesn't, I don't think he speaks it as well. I'm not sure. And then it took me a while to figure it out. That's how much it was just, that's just how life was. I spoke in Gujarati. So I guess what kind of, first of all, how old are your kids? And second of all, how have you gone about um, teaching them Cantonese?
We teach starting at birth. So basically, when they were in my belly, they have been hearing me talking Cantonese. My first child was he's 6 years old, and then the little one is 16 months. So they are 5 years apart. So the first one, and then the thing is, we are in a Cantonese household. My husband also speaks Cantonese, but then he's in elementary level. He doesn't read or write. And his parents, his family all speak Cantonese. So I think that's an advantage for us to maintain the Cantonese speaking at home. I am very strict at home that when I hear English, I would say, oh, can you repeat that in Cantonese? Even for my husband, like he would sleep out, like put your shoes on, speaking English, put your shoes on. I was like, that sentence, you can really say it in Cantonese. It's not difficult at all. So I make him speak Cantonese again. So as a parent, we need to set up an example to reinforce the language. Because if I let my husband slip, my son is gonna say more and more in English every day. So if he knows, I make him say it. Also, for me, I set up an example that I know more than one languages, and it's an advantage. I want my children to learn just like me. So I'm not the parent that's tell my children, oh, mommy don't speak English. You only can speak to me in Cantonese. I'm not that case. I want them to be able to speak both fluently. So if he is talking to me about something happening in school in English, it's okay that he tell me the whole story in English, but he also have to translate back in Cantonese. So I would make sure that he is saying the same story using same level of vocabularies, saying like as is descriptive as his English one. Or if his English one is not as well as the Cantonese version, then I would say, oh, maybe you can say your English story like this, adding more vocabularies inside, make it both of them very same level of language level.
I see that. I think that's really important, because looking back, well, not just looking back, but in my personal life, but also just quite a few people that I know who speak another language because they spoke it at home. What often happens is, I alluded to it earlier, they start to go to school and their English starts to improve far faster than than their heritage language. And I think one reason that happens is when they go to school, they learn, maybe they want to tell some stories, or they learn something in science class and they thought it's really cool. And they don't
Mhm.
have that vocabulary in their heritage language, but the parents don't, when the son or daughter shares a story, maybe mixing languages or maybe all in English, the parent doesn't stop to teach the vocabulary needed to help them express themselves. Although I have to ask, I wonder, does your son get frustrated by that? Does it frustrate him?
Sometimes it does, but sometimes I mean, I don't make him to repeat the story all over again. I would just kind of paraphrase it. Is that how, like in Cantonese, and say, "Oh, is this how you? Is this what's happening at school?" So I would say it in Cantonese and ask him different questions, so that he answer it, and I was like, "Oh, so this is what happened." So that he listened to me in the Cantonese version, and I think in his little brain he will compare it, right? But another thing is because I grew up learning both English and Cantonese at the same time, also bilingually, because Hong Kong is a bilingual city. So um, I I spent the same amount of time learning English and Cantonese growing up, and that's why I'm very focusing on giving the same amount of time, quality time, learning time for my son as well.
There we go. And I was going to ask you too. So one of the things that I believe is important for children who are learning, growing up in one country such as America, where everyone speaks English, but then also trying to learn another language to a high degree of fluency, not just conversational or not just household language, but really speaking it well. One of the things that I've seen work really well is where they speak to a lot of people in English, but they also speak to a lot of people in their heritage language. So I can give you an example. I know there's one girl in particular that I know. Well, she's a woman now, but I knew her when she's really little. I've known her rather. I don't know her that well, but I did go to school with her from a very, very young age. And
Mhm.
she speaks English perfectly well, and she speaks Spanish basically at the same level. And yet
Mhm.
she's born in Canada. And one of the reasons that she's able to speak both essentially at the same level, probably exactly the same level, is that growing up, yes, she went to school in Canada, she talked to people in English, she had English friends, and so on and so forth. Yes, she spoke in Spanish at home, but she also spoke to Spanish. She also was involved in the Latino community in
Mhm.
Calgary. So she had other friends that spoke only Spanish. She went to church in Spanish. She would go to Colombia every year, every 2 years, whatever it would be, for a month during the summertime or something like that. So she had a heavy influence, not just from parents. So parents spoke in Spanish, society spoke to her in English, but to supplement her Spanish, parents also found communities in Calgary that were Spanish speaking, also would go to Colombia every year, 2 years, what regularly, let's just say.
Mhm.
And so now as an adult, she speaks both English and Spanish essentially at the same level. What are your thoughts on having the influence of other people, whether it be extended family or outside the family, to help the children to develop that depth of fluency, if that's the right word?
I think it's very important, and that's why I also emphasize on finding a learning buddy or play dates. Um, as a parent, you need to find your community. You need to find your friends so that you have like family friends, and then the kids also speak the language, and you build a relationship with the language with the community, and so that your children will have the needs to say it. If they don't find the needs, they would not want to learn it. So let's say when starting very young age before COVID, I would take my child to a Cantonese speaking restaurant every week. Like we go to Chinatown, or sometimes just some neighborhood restaurant that like a bubble tea place that where the owners speak Cantonese. I would ask them when he was only like 2 or 3, but I would say, "Oh, say good morning, 早晨." say thank you, 多謝. So you build up that community sense. Hey, there are people around me that also speak it. And later on, as he is getting older, they will have a little more conversation. They're like, oh, how are you doing? Do you want some candy? Have you had lunch yet? So you build up more like longer sentences. And then maybe like one day when he is older, like in high school, they would talk about politics, right? Oh, have you heard something on the news? You build up more vocabulary because with different type of people, especially like if I have family friends, they are doing different occupations or they went to different places to travel, and then you have different type of conversation. So that's very important. And that I very encourage like people who are learning language is to find a learning buddy. So my son has a reading group every week. They meet on Zoom every week. I used to host play dates every week at my house before COVID. I asked the kids in my neighborhood, just like 2 or 3 families come weekly, have snack, and then we read stories, and then we do some arts and craft, play games. So the children are growing up together, having friends and speaking Cantonese together. So I did
And these
that
are all
for
like native Cantonese speaking
they all
families.
have, yes, they all have families, parents who speak Cantonese fluently. So they were speaking Cantonese at birth, but after COVID, sadly, like 2, 3 families, they have like stopped all this meetup, and the kids are more, and then they don't have as much time to talk to their children because they're working. And so without the play dates, their Cantonese really just lost it. So it's really sad because they're both like dual working parents. And other than after work, you have dinner, you have bath time, you really don't have much time to teach your children. Yeah. So building the community is very important. And also I encourage parents to be more actively at school, to join the PTA, to let your school know that, hey, my language exists and this is my culture. When you do those cultural events, let your children to prepare something to show to your classmates, share your festival, and share your food, and make them be proud of who they are. And that's how the language and the culture ties together.
Totally. I agree. What else? Maybe there isn't anything else, I'm not sure, but what other kinds of things have you done to help your kids learn Cantonese, speak Cantonese, aside from some of the things that we've mentioned?
We do a lot of reading, and I spend a lot of money buying books because the shipping is really expensive, but I still do, to read all type of books, not just book at his level. Sometimes I read books that higher than their level. He doesn't have to know every single word, but he just need to like kind of get them listen to different type of vocabularies. I would read up myself first. I read Chinese book in front of him, say, so that you show that, oh, mommy is setting an example. She's reading something. I mean, she may not know what I'm reading, but then she'll ask, like, oh, what are you reading? He can pick out some characters. And so reading is a big part in our family. And travel is very important as well. We used to travel to a lot of Chinese speaking countries, cities, so that in the whole entire month, when you're immersed in the city, like we go back to Hong Kong to visit relatives. So the entire month or two, all he hears, all he speaks is Cantonese. So if you can afford to do that, that's very helpful. I know that some people that they only do the summer school in the country. Let's see. Pretty much, I mean, I think a lot of people also like, you know, let them watch movies, play games, and just whatever you can think of tie your life with the language, I will do it.
A common what's the word? Comment. A common comment that I get from parents will be that especially when they're young, not when they're older, but when they're young, they'll say things like, I want to speak in English at home and not in our mother tongue, even though they're better in their mother tongue than in English, because they're worried that when they go to school, when the kids go to school, they're not going to speak English, or that if they speak English the mother tongue at home, then they go to school in English, they'll get confused. Or what do you say to people? I'm not sure if you get that comment at all, but what would you say to someone who has that kind of perspective now that you have a son, and soon you'll have two sons that speak Cantonese and English?
One son, one boy, one girl. So well, the reason why English is the international language is because it's so easy to learn, right? Why didn't they pick like Spanish or Chinese to be the international language? So I think a lot of people are able to learn it as adults or older in age, later in age. They speak it perfectly without any problems. So what are your worries? You don't really have to start this young. And also you have the community when they step outside your home, your house, they're already speaking English. So there is nothing to worry about that they don't speak English well enough. But I think it's develop the sense of the love of reading is very important, and self-learn. How do you teach your children to learn by themselves, to read by themselves? Then it will solve the problem of not being able to catch up in English. Because I love reading at a very young age, and my mom bought me a lot of books, both English and Chinese. At the very young age, I was reading Chinese level much higher than English. And then starting from middle school and high school, I did not learn any Chinese. I stopped because I was already in America. So middle school and high school, I stopped learning Chinese. I stopped speaking it as much. Pretty much I only have one friend that speaks Cantonese in my school. And then I only speak to my mom once in a while. The rest of my life in high school was just English. But I already have a very strong foundation in Chinese because I love reading. I was reading like on my own. I never learned Chinese history from my school, like elementary school, but I learned all my history through reading. So if you can develop teach your children how to read early enough, English or any language, I would say, then at the end, if they are interested in any topic they want, they can just learn it by themselves. You don't have to worry. So that's why I started.
Sorry. Go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's why my Cantonese mommy's YouTube channel is focused on just reading. Yeah.
So can your son read equally well in English and in Cantonese?
His English is catching up as much as his Chinese. So his Chinese reading is higher than English reading level, but his English reading level jumps very quickly. He started learning English and alphabet when he was 4. So I didn't teach him like ABC songs before 4. I mean, he hears it from his friends, but he doesn't really know what they are. So I left it all to the teacher because the teacher have their own way to teach phonics. And I leave the English part for the teacher. Up until COVID, because he was remotely learning at home, then I had to step in to teach him English as well. But before that, he speak Cantonese first, and then he went to our Mandarin preschool for 1 year, but just a very part-time, like 3 hours a day, 3 times a week, just to get him to learn the school environments. And we don't have a Cantonese preschool around here, so I sent him to Mandarin one. But for English, I left it to the teacher, and then from these 2 years, he just can read it equally as well. Yeah.
And is his English speaking stronger than his Cantonese? I would
No,
assume by no.
Chinese is he reads his Chinese is stronger. I mean I did that purposely
So right
because
now his Mandarin, his
Cantonese,
Cantonese is stronger than his English, even spoken.
yes. Because I know that he's gonna stop at a certain age, but once he have built a very strong foundation, I'm trying to do what I was. So I stopped learning Chinese at sixth grade. So I probably don't expect him to learn Chinese after sixth grade because middle school and high school in US is quite hectic. You have lots of English material to read and lots of other activities to prepare. So, but once he's up to very high level reading level, then I could stop. Yeah,
And does he speak any Mandarin at all?
he does.
How
So,
much? But not as good as Cantonese, I'd assume.
so the reading in Mandarin and Cantonese, because they use the same reading. So reading is the same. Spoken is as good. I would say in Cantonese is his first language, Mandarin is second, and English is the third. Because his
Wow, English is
Mandarin,
his third, even though so he's going into he's in grade one right now.
yes, grade one.
Wow,
I
even
think,
so, even after going through like kindergarten for a year, his Mandarin is still better than his English.
yeah,
How did that
because
happen?
because I enrolled him to Mandarin class. And then when I do stories, I read to him at home. I try to read Cantonese. And then when we have more time, I would do the Mandarin reading as well. And then at last, he would read English. So we do very little
I
reading
see.
in English. Yeah.
So he grew up with primarily Cantonese, but some Mandarin. I
Mm-hmm.
see. That's so interesting. That's fascinating. That's very, very interesting.
So he
Cool.
can, like, when he is as fluent as his Mandarin is almost as same as the Cantonese because the reading is the same. So his vocabulary level is the same. Yeah.
When he reads in well, let's just say Chinese
Chinese
because it's the same.
character.
But does he so does he I'm assuming he reads simple and I'm sorry, I'm assuming he reads traditional then?
Yes.
Okay. Very
He
cool.
reads traditionals and then he read it in Cantonese. And because I buy most of my books from Taiwan, so they have the pinyin. They don't call pinyin, they call juyin. So he can read the juyin,
So you
but
can
not.
read Julian as well. He can read that?
We learn it together. I
Cool.
didn't know. I didn't know at first, but we just learned it last year. So that because he can read juyin, so that he can read on his own if he wants to learn the Mandarin in the future. But right now, he knows the Cantonese reading first. He read everything he see in Cantonese. But then when I want him to read it in Mandarin, he can do it because he knows the Juyin. Mm-hmm.
I have a funny Julian story. So I was telling you before we started recording that I speak Mandarin. So I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I was first, let me think, the first, I want to say maybe 4 years of learning Mandarin, something like that. The first 4 years roughly was all from mainland influences. So all my teachers were from mainland China. All the textbooks I used were from mainland China. I went to mainland China to study. I spent 3 months there. All my influence was the mainland China. And then the 3 years after that, virtually all of my influence was from Taiwan.
Mm.
So I went to Taiwan and I didn't know that they had Juyin, like I didn't know that. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember this one time, and this happened more than once, but this one time in particular, I used to I used to volunteer in schools and I would talk to the kids about Canada. I'd prepare like a presentation, we talk about it, and it was like really good Mandarin practice because we do it all in Mandarin. So it's very, very good Mandarin practice for me. And I remember this one time they asked me to load up the first time they asked me, oh hey, just put your presentation up on the screen. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. So I go to their keyboard and I can't type. I can't because it's all Julian. I was like, and I'm looking at the keyboard. I was like, what is this? How do I was like, I can't do it. They're like, what do you mean you can't do it? I was like, what, I don't know how to type this. Like what is, I didn't even know what it was.
Oh, yeah.
And then I would often
Yeah.
ask people, especially because of the accent is obviously different than what I was used to. So if they
Yes.
would say, let's say they'd say a new word, like, let me think of an example. Like, let's say they said, what's a new word I wouldn't have known at that time? Well, let's just take a really simple example. Let's say I didn't know the word 吃, for example. Let's say I didn't know that word. And then but they might say 吃, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
have their 吃, their 吃 turn to 吃, right?
Yeah.
Often in Taiwan. So often I'd have a hard time figuring out what the characters were and how to write it. So I'd ask them like some pin, and they'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, and they wouldn't know the pinyin. So it's very difficult for me because I wouldn't know like how to write in pinyin. So I'd have a very difficult time trying to figure out to pronounce it because they might say it as like with a s instead of a sh, and I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't know. And it
Yeah.
was very it was very difficult initially, and then now it's different. Now almost everyone, most of the people I talk to are from Taiwan nowadays. So now that's my bigger
Yeah.
influence, but it was an interesting learning curve
So did you
initially.
end up learning Juyin?
I want to. It's on my list of things to do. It
Mm.
doesn't. I don't really need to use it nowadays because I only do traditional characters nowadays. I don't do simplified because I don't really know anyone that texts me in simplified.
The
So
reason why we chose to choose teach him Juyin instead of the Pinyin is because my son didn't know alphabet before, and then there will be a confusion learning the pronunciation of Pinyin and the pronunciation of English. So that's why I didn't want him to learn the Pinyin. And then Juyin is very just a character. So that all the books I have Juyin. So it would make much more sense for me just to teach him Juyin. And I didn't know at first. I learned Mandarin when I was in my 20s. So I basically learned it from listening and from just talking and didn't really know Juyin opinion perfectly. Yeah. So now I learned Juyin together with him, and then everything, all the pronunciation makes so much more sense.
totally. Well, we can start to wrap up here. Are there any parting things, any final things you'd like to share?
Um, I would like to share, like, tell the parents who wants to teach their children Cantonese or their mother tongue, is to set a very realistic goal. And once you know your goal, then you have to, and it's an investment. You have to invest your time in it and then the money in it. So if you spend a lot of time and lots of money in it, you will get very good results for sure. And so if you don't have enough time, then you need to compensate with the money that you spend, like hire tutor, hire teachers, and vice versa. If you have more time, then you just teach it yourself and don't tell people, oh, I don't know where to start, right? Because it's all, you already know it's your mother tongue. All you need to spend is just time and money. Then it will happen. But if you don't have those two at the moment, it's okay. All you need to do is show them your culture and let them be proud of it. And continue just like taking them to eat Chinese food or Indian food or whatever your culture is. Show them your festival, your history, and let them figure out, hey, I am a Chinese, I'm a Cantonese, or I'm Japanese, and I will learn it in my future because I'm so proud of who I am. Because I personally learned a lot of language. I learned Mandarin in my 20s. I learned Korean in my 20s. I learned Japanese when I was in my high school, like middle school and high school year. And I think because of my passion, all this language just comes to me, and I don't have to struggle learning a language because of my passion of learning. So my words to the parents would be, teach your child how to self-learn and learn what they love. And eventually your language will come to you.
Cool. Well, it was nice chatting. You get everyone listening / watching can go check out Cantonese Mommy on YouTube, Instagram, anywhere else?
Facebook, and
Facebook.
I have my website as well.
What's the website?
CantoneseMommy.com.
Easy, CantoneseMommy.com. Okay. well, I guess I will see you guys later.
Thank you.